Hello, my name is Constanza Sonia, and today I am going to talk about the movement behind Unidad Popular, the revolution flavored with red wine and empanadas. The Popular Unity was an electoral coalition of Chile's left-wing political parties that brought Salvador Allende to the presidency. It was formed on October 1969 on the occasion of the 1970 presidential election and replaced the Frente de Acción Popular. It consists of the Radical Party, the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, the Unitary People's Action Movement, the Radical Left, and the Independent People's Action. After it joins the Christian Left and the Worker and Peasant MAPU in 1973. It was also supported by the National Trade Union Headquarters, the CUT, the Central Unitaria de Trabajadores. And the political parties were represented in the UP Political Commission. But the popular unity was not only the result of a political agreement that led Salvador Allende to the presidency. In fact, the people's unity, from an historical point of view, needs to be seen as the result of a long popular struggles that date back to the 19th century. Um, it constituted the popular movement with its relative autonomy from the state. The UP represented a time when all the popular struggles, the more historical and the newest one, multiplying the subjects and actors of change. Never did the people so massively as in the UP began to be the protagonists of their own destiny. But also, never as in the UP, the people activity was perceived as something that's so radical that threatened by the traditional social groups when all fears multiplied and were efficiently exacerbated by the press on the right of the right wing. During the UP, the historical tension of the popular movement became more radical. Now that the people had the government as an ally in their struggles, but the government would be soon besieged by the traditional powers, both external and internal. Um, the popular movement would be caught up in the destruction of the follow the rhythms and signs of the government. Example, change the locked in institutional and political negotiation, which is increasingly difficult to realize, or to enroll and accelerate their learning of autonomy to strengthen and expand their position of power in society. Popular mobilization at this point was beginning to unravel from the government and affirming its logic of the power of the people. However, in the same processes of a sharpening class struggle, the tragedy began to be drawn on the horizon. The UP government had to face a growing beating right, which narrowed and made it impossible to negotiate politically, which was the political parties knew how to do, while the people and the left were striding and divided in the face of the need to support the government and by ensuring their achievements at the base of the possibilities of socialism. The division of the left, for its part, was an expression of all strategic problems that not solved by the popular movement itself, included that of their autonomy in front of the state. In parallel with the UP was born a musical movement widely recognized for its lyrics and social sense called La Nueva Canción Chilena. La Nueva Canción Chilena had been developed since the 60s and consolidated itself at the end of those years and projected into the early years of the next decade. Its main background was important national folklorists, composers, and researchers. We can highlight some artists such as Violeta Parra, Margot Loyola, Gabriela Pizarro, and Hector Pavés. And it is important to mention also some poets such as Pablo Neruda and Nicanor Parra. In this Latin American folkloric era, the Nueva Canción Chilena incorporated a strong commitment to the process of social change that Chile had been living for the past few years. Many of its exponents made an effective commitment to the government of the popular unity, transforming into a musical movement with a clear political militancy. The Nueva Canción Chilena served as a platform for Salvador Allende's presidential campaign in 1970 and actively contributed to the activities of the People's Unity government, generating a production of issues and aimed at raising awareness of the history of the popular movement itself, of the responsibilities that the people have in the Chilean way to socialism, to criticize and comment on the contingency during the period of Salvador Allende's government. This election was therefore presented as the great opportunity to achieve change or to preserve and restore the same system that had prevailed in Chile for decades. The creation of groups such as Quilapayún, Inti Illimani, Abarcoa, Tiempo Nuevo, and others, and the performance and creation of Isabel Arangel Parra, Víctor Jara, Rolando Alarcón, Patricio Vance, and many others offer unrestricted support for Salvador Allende's campaign, um, proclaiming that there's no revolution without music, without songs. In fact, in the late 60s and early 70s, much of the creation of the protagonists of La Nueva Canción Chilena had a revolutionary tone and were orientated to the denunciation of the prevailing social order, to criticism of capitalism, to the promotion of memory of social fighters such as Camilo Torres, Che Guevara, or episodes such as the massacre of the Santa Maria de Iquique. Víctor Jara, the singer who had raised the Preguntas por Puerto Montt.
Bien, voy a preguntar por ti, por aquel, por ti que quedaste solo y el que murió sin saber.
And who had brought to Chile a desalambrar.
Junto a los presentes, si no se han puesto a pensar que esta tierra es de nosotros y no del que te.
And de Camilo Torres.
De cayó Camilo, nació una cruz.
The one which invited us to live to Cochabamba and their guerrillas, and who had sung to the Aparecido.
Abre sendas por los cerros, deja su huella en el viento.
And de Che Guevara.
Mataron al guerrillero, Che Comandante Guevara.
Now, took his guitar to participate in the election campaign, accepting the conditions that the democratic game posed. Víctor Jara participated to carry Allende's images and messages through all the corners of Chile and integrated the groups of artists and musicians supporters of the Popular Unity candidate. For his part, Ángel Parra wrote and recorded the Unidad Popular.
Trabajo, lucha y verdad es la unidad popular.
This was a strictly campaign song in which he sings and says, "The whole town is played in September, comrade. Work, struggle, and truth is the popular unity." Insisted on the need for the will to win. Parra addresses women, students, miners, firemen, employees, workers, peasants, and highlight the importance of the unity of wills and the decisiveness of the 1970 juncture. It is a revolutionary song that opts for the electoral route. Perhaps the clearest expression of its revolutionary song aimed at Allende's election campaign and the Popular Unity campaign is the Canción del Poder Popular.
Porque esta vez no se trata de cambiar un presidente, será el pueblo quien construya un Chile bien diferente.
In which we find the topics of the whole decade and that were constant in La Nueva Canción Chilena, where they insisted that because this time it does not try to change, a president will be the person who built a very different Chile, prophesizing that the homeland will be free for now, the thing is going, and no one can take away the right to be free. And as human beings, we can live in Chile. Allende assumed the presidency on November 4th, 1970, initiated what he designated the People's Government. The artists who had been in the campaign and called out the people to choose the Chilean way to socialism changed their discourse. The dominant tone became an invitation tone to work to build a new Chile without leaving aside the vigilant attitude towards the opposition, the right wing. Predominantly in the second line, the irony and sarcasm is really used. These creations emphasize the collective responsibility that the popular sector have acquired in carrying out the government with Allende as president. The symbol of this attitude is the attention given to the voluntary work done on Sundays as a sign of adherence to the popular effort to build a socialist Chile. Particularly significant in this sense is Víctor Jara's song, "Qué lindo es ser voluntario."
Qué cosa más linda es ser voluntario, construyendo parques para el vecindario.
A similar strategy was followed by most contagion songs that seek to denounce the political enemies of the popular government. Ironic tone, mockery, and were predominant in these compositions. For example, we have one song called Las Ollitas.
Se ha fijado Eduardo, dígame Juan Luis, que estos roticuacos no dejan vivir.
El enano maldito.
El enano maldito acota, ya lo pateamos en la cintura.
La tribuna.
Estaba el momio encumbrado,
Sí, señor.
arriba del pueblo entero,
¿Cómo no?
pero entonces nos unimos y ahí se vino.
Vox Populi.
Para los clavos del pueblo que lo plantea Salvador.
La merluza.
O sea, qué asco este pescado, gallo. ¿Te cacháis?
And Onofre Cifrey.
Oiga, mi hijo, tráigame un sándwich de cocodrilo con palta, por favor.
No hay cocodrilo.
Es el colmo. ¿Hasta dónde vamos a llegar con este gobierno?
On the other hand, we also have the muralist movement promoted by the Ramona Parra Brigade. The Ramona Parra Brigades are organized groups of young muralists whose aim is to capture messages related to the political ideology of the Chilean left. They have a close connection to the work of the Communist Youth of Chile and the guidelines and proposals made by the Communist Party. In this way, it is possible to identify these brigades as a communist political propaganda groups. In the beginning, the work of these groups focused on the elaboration of slogans allusive to Salvador Allende's for presidential candidacy. After Allende's election in 1970, the brigades integrated the Allende's campaign signature slogans, colorful drawings, and images representative of the most varied components of national reality, such as workers, family, the geography of our country, among other pictorial themes, as a way of communicating and celebrating the management carried out by the new government. As a result of this motivation, the huge murals that evoked the Latin American experience of muralism were created. Undoubtedly, this graphic manifestation passed to be an important part of the cultural imaginary of the time. If we see any of those pictures of mural, of etc., we would know that it was them who drew it and from which time it was. In this period, take part the creation of the mural El Primer Gol del Pueblo Chileno in 1971 in the commune of La Granja, in which the VRP and the famous Chilean painter Roberto Mata worked together for an exhibition to the Museum of Contemporary Art. And it also takes part the realization of a mural in the Tajamares of the Rio Mapocho that had a collaboration of the national plastic artists such as Garcia Barrios and Jose Balmes. However, in 1972, and due to the prevailing climate of social polarization, the brigades were forced to abandon the realization of pictorial representations and to continue to exclusively the production of texts and phrases sympathetic to the government of the popular unity, as a strategy of defending the prevailing government, which at the time was delegitimized by the right wing. Sadly, immediately after the 1973 coup, the intervention of these brigades were racist, and several of their members were victims of political persecution. The work of the brigades was exclusively limited to the small format graphic productions, such as brochures, pamphlets, posters, among others. It was only in the late 80s, on the eve of the realization of the country plebiscite of 1988, that marked the return of the democracy when these brigades saw enabled a return to the urban space. From then until the present day, the Ramona Barra Brigades do sustained work in different locations of our country. Another way, and perhaps the best known one that the UP used to bring art and culture closer to people was the so-called Tren de la Cultura. The People's Train of Culture was a traveling outreach initiative that moved half hundred enthusiast artists through various points of the country. In its majority were Chilean artists from different disciplines, such as theater, music, ballet, and visual arts. This special activity was sponsored by the Department of Culture of the Presidency, led by the writer Waldo Arias. It also participated in its organization the artist Guillermo Núñez, who would later be appointed as director of the Museum of Contemporary Art. The initiative was supported by the workers of the railways, from the mechanics to the waitress, worked with love and generosity for the welfare of the caravan. In Puerto Montt began the rich programming in both cities and branches. When returning to the capital, in each station gathered a crowd that waited happily for the artist. The shows and talks were made of writers, as I mentioned before, poets, painters, artists from each place. In Meli Village, it was the first time that a show with professional artists and high quality stages was presented. In the caravan, there were actors such as Pedro Villagra, María Eugenia Cavieres, Silvia Santelices, Sergio Bushman, and Jorge Acevedo, known as the Malo, who was an stage director and assistant director of the experimental theory of the University of Chile. They also have the great dancers of the Chilean People's Ballet, Patricio Bonster and Joan Turner, and Ryan Mendez. The choreographer and first dancer of the National Ballet with Fernando Cortizo. They overwhelmed the spectators who had never seen that form of dance. They also have singers such as Julio Numaster and Manuel Salazar from the duo The Amerindios. They also have young singing songwriters such as Fernando Acevedo, and they also have the group Los Emigrantes, formed by Carlos Valladares, Enrique San Martin, and Rolando Larcón. They also have the important participation of the famous and highly respected mime, Enrique Neusbander, because there was no lack of prominent representation of the show business. They also have admired animators of the night, such as Guillermo Bruce and Sergio Feito, who felt proud to offer quality humor performances to their brighter viewers. The theater people came to each village and began to talk to the locals to learn about their most serious problems. And when the time began, the theatrical performance started, and to the surprise of the inhabitants, the actors placed them and talked about their difficulties. Such a stage work produced an impressive approach and the astonishment of the viewers who thought the actors were witches. The stagers of the municipal theater performance wandered the street stages and even joined in two tracks just to make one big platform there. As the train progressed, artists and writers were incorporated, and there was no lack of exhibitions by local plastic artists, and all contributed to enrich the dynamic program. The train returning on February 16 to Rancagua, having served a full month of intense artistic activity in a very stretched part of our country. Here we have the reference used in this presentation. And I also put the links for the songs that you listen through the presentation. I hope you like it.